It's 2 in the morning. You're replaying a conversation from 3 days ago, not because it was traumatic, because your brain caught something small, a slight change in someone's tone, a comment that could be read two ways, a moment when you might have said the wrong thing. You're not choosing to think about it. Your body is trying to solve for what the room actually meant, and it won't stop until it feels like it has the answer. You've done this for as long as you can remember. You've been told it's a problem. Nothing works. There's a specific psychology behind why the loop keeps running, and it isn't a flaw in your character. If you're a person who overthinks everything, who replays conversations, second-guesses decisions, and can't seem to stop your mind from running scenarios long after the situation has passed, the psychology underneath isn't what most people assume. It isn't anxiety alone. It isn't broken thinking. It's a specific documented pattern in which your nervous system is doing exactly what it once needed to do to keep you safe. Here's the thing nobody talks about. Overthinking is almost always the residue of a developmental period in which reading the room correctly was safety critical. Maybe it was a household where a parent's mood could shift without warning. Maybe it was a school where being socially misread had real costs. Maybe it was a job or relationship where the wrong response produced consequences you couldn't afford. Whatever the environment was, your nervous system learned to solve for it, running constant background processing on tone, expression, subtext, and the small tells that predict what's coming next. That processing worked. It kept you oriented. It let you navigate rooms other kids would have missed. And now, decades later, the processing is still running, in meetings that don't matter, in text exchanges that were fine, in conversations that ended hours ago. The environment changed, the wiring didn't. The overthinking you're doing now is your nervous system correctly executing a program it doesn't know is no longer necessary. Psychologist Susan Nolan Huxamer, whose research on rumination shaped the field, documented a cognitive pattern she called response styles theory. Some people, when faced with uncertainty or emotional discomfort, respond by cycling through the situation repeatedly in an attempt to solve it. Nolan Huxamer's work showed this pattern isn't laziness or weakness. It's a specific cognitive style, often reinforced early in life by environments where mental problem-solving felt like the only available response to threats the person couldn't act on. Psychologist Elaine Aron's highly sensitive person research documented an overlapping pattern. People whose nervous systems process more input per second than most register subtler signals in social environments. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges, whose polyvagal theory has become foundational in trauma research, offered a framework that ties these together. Nervous systems that developed under chronic uncertainty maintain a specific state of vigilance long after the uncertainty resolves. The vigilance isn't dysfunction, it's an adaptation that outlasted its environment. Picture this. It's 2 in the morning. You're in bed. The house is quiet, and your mind is running a conversation from 3 days ago on a loop. You're checking every word you said. You're checking their tone. You're checking whether their smile at the end was warm or performative. You're checking whether the pause after your last comment meant something. You're not choosing to do this, but your body will not release the analysis until it feels like it has resolved what the room actually meant. This is your nervous system running an old protocol. Somewhere in your life, reading a room correctly was safety critical enough that your body committed to always doing it. Now the room doesn't require it anymore. The conversation is over, the stakes are low, but your body doesn't know the stakes are low. It knows what it learned. The 2 in the morning replay is the body doing what it was trained to do, in a world that no longer needs that training. The overthinking isn't dysfunction, it's an adaptation that outlasted the environment. But here's where it gets interesting. The cognitive profile behind chronic overthinking is often paired with unusually accurate social perception. Overthinkers tend to notice subtle emotional shifts other people miss, catch inconsistencies in stories, and read subtext surface processors don't register. These are the same skills that make therapists, writers, negotiators, and diplomats good at their jobs. The problem isn't the skill, It's that the skill is running constantly, on every input, whether the input requires it or not. But there's more going on than just perception. Overthinking also produces a specific kind of quiet loneliness. Because your inner processing is running at a level most people don't share, the person you're replaying the conversation with has usually forgotten it happened, moved on and gone to bed hours ago. You're solving for what the room meant, and the room is already asleep. This isn't a moral failure. It's the specific asymmetry of running a nervous system calibrated for high-signal environments in a world where most people are operating on a much lower resolution. And here's the kicker. The cultural framing of overthinking has been almost entirely as a personal weakness. You need to stop. You need to let go. You need to relax. That framing misses what's happening. You aren't failing to relax. Your nervous system is correctly executing a protocol it learned when relaxing wasn't safe. Telling an overthinker to stop overthinking is telling their body to unlearn a skill that once kept them oriented. The unlearning is possible, but it isn't a matter of willpower. It's the nervous system slowly being convinced that the environment has actually changed. Now let's be honest. There's a difference between the pattern this video is describing and clinical anxiety or OCD, which have different mechanisms and require different responses. If your overthinking includes intrusive thoughts, you can't stop even when you know they're irrational, or if the loops involve harm checking, contamination, or specific rituals, that's worth taking to a professional rather than reading as adaptive overthinking. The reframe here applies to the ordinary, chronic, room-reading kind of overthinking that many people carry without any diagnosable condition. You probably know which one you have. But for the person watching this and recognizing themselves in the 2 a.m. replay, here's what's happening. You aren't broken. You aren't weak. You aren't failing to relax. You're a person whose nervous system learned at some point in your life that reading rooms correctly was worth the cost of constant processing. And it's still running that program because it doesn't yet have proof the environment has changed. The work isn't to shame the loop into stopping. Shame doesn't turn off nervous system protocols. The work is to slowly give your body evidence that the current environment is safer than the one that trained you, through small, repeated experiences of not being punished for missing something. Over time, the protocol updates. There's something quietly true about a person lying awake at 2 a.m, replaying a conversation from 3 days ago. They aren't obsessed. They aren't broken. They're a person whose nervous system learned once that reading the room correctly was worth staying awake for, and the wiring never got the memo that the current room doesn't require it. If you've spent years quietly hating the loops in your own head, this might be the moment to consider that the loops weren't dysfunction. They were the specific shape of your intelligence trying to keep you safe in an environment that once required it. The loops can quiet, but they quiet through evidence, not through shame. You aren't broken. You aren't failing to relax. You're a person whose nervous system learned to read rooms carefully in an environment that once made that reading safety critical. And the 2 a.m. replay is that same nervous system running a protocol it hasn't been told it can retire. If you're the person I've been describing for the last 8 minutes, the one who has been lying awake replaying conversations, second-guessing decisions and quietly hating yourself for a mind that won't stop, I want you to hear this. Nothing is wrong with you. The mind that won't stop is a mind that once needed not to stop. It will learn to quiet, not through willpower, through accumulated evidence that the room is safe now. If any part of this landed for you, I'd love to know. Tell me in the comments about a specific loop you've been running lately, or a moment when you noticed them. Environment had changed even if your nervous system hadn't caught up. If you want more videos that name what's actually happening in the patterns most people never have the language for, that's what this channel is for. Hit subscribe. See you in the next.